Specific steps to install a Humminbird Helix series fish finder, including a few mistakes I made so you can avoid them. This week on Kayak Hacks. Here's everything I need to mount up my Helix 7 fish finder. It's all the ram components as well as the Helix. Let's take a quick run through so you know what to expect to get. With the Helix itself, you get the bracket, but you do not get the ram mount that goes on it. You have to buy this adapter separately, and it does not come with the screws to attach it to the frame of the fish finder. It comes with the large clamp, but what comes in the kit is this adapter right here, which is going to assume that you want to screw this directly onto your kayak instead of attaching it to your utility track. So you need to buy one of these utility track ram adapters separately. Now, to get the transducer on, it's a separate challenge. The first component is this long aluminum bar with a mount that the kit provides, again, with one of these screw-on adapters. And you need to get the 1-inch slide-on adapter if you're going to put it on your utility track. Then what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to bend this to go down into the water. At the other end, it has one of these adapters that attaches directly to the transducer. But there is a problem with the transducer and the ram mount. The ram mount is sized just a little bit too big to go onto the screw. See how it cocks to the side here? And so what I'm going to have to do is get my grinder and grind that off so it'll fit smooth and rotate properly. That way I'll be able to get it on correctly. I've finished the grind. It took about 1/8 an inch off, and now it fits just perfectly. And I can put the screw in there and make my adjustments. Over the top of the aluminum bar is one of these flexible plastic pipe thingies that really doesn't do anything other than reduce the glare. The first thing you need to do when mounting the transducer is figure out where you want it to be and what orientation you want it to be in. I chose to always have mine totally drop down as far as it'll go on the ram mount, and then pushed back against my Scotty mount to make sure it is always in the exact same position. Then, without the plastic tube on, I took a leveled it out to make sure it was oriented directly vertically, because that way I know I can then take the transducer, orient that also to front and back to the kayak before I lock down the screw. Then, with the other screw at the bottom, I could take my level and put the level on it to make sure it was planing exactly parallel to the bottom of the kayak. That way I'm assured of getting a nice flat plane and a good side image. The other thing you need to look at is how far the transducer is below your boat. So here's the thing I don't get. Ram sends us this aluminum bar that we have to bend ourselves. So the one-shot measurement you have to make is where do you want the bend to occur, and make sure that your transducer still is below the kayak. When this thing goes into the mount, it goes in a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and mark that. I'm going to take that out, and now when that is on the floor, that is on the bottom of my kayak. Well, not happy with the way that turned out. I don't like this bend right here. I would have rather had a straight bend, and I now realize that I should have used my vise in a different way. I should have put it in this way to clamp and get a good leverage point along a longer surface. The other way I realized I could have done this is put it on the edge of a table and clamp it down and then bend. Now this is malleable, so I could always bang it straight with my hammer, but I'm going to go see if this is going to work the way it is. I think it will be. It looks like there's a decent amount of distance between the top and the bottom, and I bet this will fit just fine. Once I got this all assembled, I've got about 4 inches between the bottom of my kayak and the transducer. Well, that's more than I need, but I am reluctant to cut this off until I have a lot more experience with it, and then maybe I'll go ahead and raise it up and have it closer to the bottom of the kayak. All that I'm losing by having this extra 4 inches is 4 inches of accuracy in the depth measurement, and given that the side imaging doesn't work once you're shallower than 2 feet, it doesn't really matter from a side imaging perspective, because when that happens, I'm going to rotate it around, loosen the ram mount, and then pull it up out of the water so I can get across the oyster beds and anything else that's shallow. But then when I want to use it again, I want to be able to loosen that mount, drop it all the way down, spin it over, and then tighten it, and have this in exactly the same position each time. Now let's talk about the cables. The transducer cable is very long, and I decided to do a permanent installation in this kayak, but if you bundle the wires up and then just cable tie it to various places, you can do a temporary installation. But even if you have a sit on top kayak, as soon as you run this cable through the body of your kayak, it's essentially a permanent mount for the transducer, because there's no way to unscrew the transducer from the cable. The entire cable has to come out. So I don't think that that's a big deal. So what I did is I cable tied the cable to this plastic tube and then began to run it underneath the sides of my native kayak. They've got plenty of space under here where I can do that. I elected to use these cable clamps, and I mounted them on the inside edge of my native using brass number 8 screws with finish washers so they would look nice. And given that I'm a little bit OCD, I used my level to make sure I've got the screw in the same place on the right side as on the left side. I know, it's crazy. Then, once I got the cable routed around, I left a couple coils of the cable over here because I may want to move this a little bit, either forward, backward, or maybe even sit it on a piece of wood in the center of my kayak. I need some more experience to see what works best for me when I'm out fishing. Then obviously I also cable tied the battery cable and the transducer cable together. But note that the mount, which is the expensive component, can always be removed just by unscrewing it from the ram mount. And I can take this inside and make sure that this doesn't get wet. In terms of the battery cable, I've decided I want to put the battery box somewhere in the center, and I've got to figure that out based on the balance of the kayak. So once I get on the water, I'll have my level with me. Again, I'm OCD. I'll sit it in the water and I'll see where this sits with all my gear in the kayak, and then I'll move the battery left to right, and I'll actually mark it with a Sharpie pen so I know where to stick it. Now the battery cable is a lot shorter than the transducer cable, so you have less flexibility in terms of where it goes. On my kayak, I elected to run it around the bar that sits on top here and then cable tie it down. Then the next thing I did was I put my battery inside a dollar store plastic box, and I created 2 lengths of wire to connect to the actual connectors on the battery. When I take this in and out, I do not want to put stress on these two connectors because I believe that if I do that, they will eventually bend and break. Rather, I'll connect my battery cable to the ends of the connectors that I created here. You also have to get a 3 amp fuse that does not come with the Helix 7 kit. I got this at Auto Advance or O'Reilly Auto, one of those auto stores. They have plenty of these. You can also put these in an old ammo box, but I think this will be good enough. This dollar store box has clamps on the side, and frankly, if this falls in the water, I'm screwed anyway. And I cut a small slit right here for the 2 wires to come out. My theory is the water is going to hit the top and run down, so I wanted the opening to be on the sides. And given that the water comes from the front, I'm going to have this facing back towards me. Time for the moment of truth, powering up. It says transducer is not connected, that's good. And now it should start in simulation mode. And here we go. It's in the simulation. It looks like everything is working. Successful install. So that's how I put mine together. As always, comments on how this could have been done better so other people can take advantage of everyone's experience are welcome. Comment below. Take care.